Did you know that something like 15% of students in the U.S. need special education services?
Wow, that's...
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a big chunk of the student population,
yeah.
and they're relying on this specialized field that's facing a massive teacher shortage.
Huge shortage.
So today we're going to be diving deep into this, into a perspective that you might not often hear about, which is the financial strain
Yeah,
of becoming and staying a special ed teacher.
absolutely. It's a critical issue.
Yeah.
And I think it often gets overshadowed by
Really?
all the discussions about teacher burnout.
Right.
But you can't really fix burnout if the foundation of the profession is shaky, and financially it is.
Yeah, it's like asking someone to build a house on sand.
Exactly.
We have some research here from Jaime Hoerricks,
Okay.
and her experience kind of sheds light on this cost of entry problem.
Right.
So just to be eligible to teach in a single state, she had to take 9 standardized tests,
Oh, wow.
each costing $125. And that's before we even consider the often unpaid student teaching component.
Yeah, and for a lot of aspiring teachers, that financial burden comes on top of existing student loan debt from undergrad.
It's a lot.
It's a huge barrier to entry, especially for those from lower income backgrounds.
It really is, and James' story really highlights this, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Even with grants, her internship cost nearly $15,000.
Wow.
And she already had advanced degrees from a previous career.
Right.
So imagine the hurdles for someone fresh out of college, passionate about helping these students, but facing such a steep financial climb.
It really raises concerns about who we're excluding from this really vital profession.
Absolutely.
And perpetuates a system that feels inaccessible
Yeah.
to those who might be perfectly suited for it. It's not just a personal financial strain.
Right.
It's a systemic issue with long-term consequences.
And then, so you jump through all these hoops, you're trained and ready,
Right.
but then
The starting salary in many areas barely puts you above the poverty line.
this is where the disconnect feels so jarring.
It is.
You're entrusted with the education and development of students facing unique challenges, requiring specialized support, and yet the compensation
Right.
barely covers basic living expenses.
Yeah.
It feels like a fundamental mismatch of priorities.
Yeah, and I think that's where the burnout narrative comes in.
Yeah,
It's so important to acknowledge,
of course.
but we can't just treat burnout as the sole problem without recognizing that it's a symptom of a larger issue.
It's like constantly patching up a leaking roof
Right.
instead of addressing the damage
Yes.
that's causing the leak in the first place.
Exactly.
So are we saying that we need to stop talking about burnout?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Teacher well-being is critical,
Okay.
but it's crucial to understand that it often stems from a system that doesn't value these professionals enough to provide a living wage, proper resources, and a supportive structure.
You can't expect someone to thrive in an environment that constantly puts them under immense pressure,
No, you can't.
both financially and emotionally.
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to the concept of school choice
Okay.
and its impact on special education.
Right.
It's a complex topic, but I think it's essential for our listeners to kind of understand how it fits into this bigger picture.
Absolutely. I think on the surface,
Yeah.
school choice, with its charter schools and voucher programs, it might seem like it's expanding options for parents and students.
Right.
However, there are unintended consequences that can actually negatively impact special education.
Okay, so unpack this for us.
Sure.
What's the connection?
So public schools are obligated by law
Okay.
to provide special education services
To all students.
to all students who qualify,
Yeah.
regardless of their needs.
Okay.
And this commitment requires significant resources,
Yeah.
charter schools and voucher programs, while offering choice,
Right.
often divert funding away from those public schools, creating this ripple effect.
So essentially, it's like public schools, which are legally bound to serve all students, are being financially stretched thin, while other institutions, not held to the same standards,
Right.
receive funding.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this funding disparity translates into fewer resources, fewer teachers, larger class sizes,
Right.
less individualized attention
Yeah.
for the students who need it most.
It's a concerning picture
It is.
of a two-tiered system.
Yeah.
And it seems like the conversation around solutions needs to move beyond simple fixes. We see these mentorship programs, signing bonuses.
All right.
Are these really addressing the core issues here?
Well, they can play a role.
Okay.
Certainly mentorship, for example,
Yeah.
provides invaluable support for new teachers,
Right.
but they're more like bandages on a deeper wound.
Right.
They don't address the root cause of the problem, which is a lack of adequate and equitable funding for public schools.
Yeah. Specifically for special education.
So it's about looking beyond temporary solutions and focusing on systemic change.
Absolutely.
We need to shift our thinking about education as an expense and start seeing it as a critical investment in our collective future.
It's an investment that yields incredible returns.
Yeah.
And it's an investment that requires us to reevaluate how we value and compensate the individuals who dedicate their lives to educating some of our most vulnerable students.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We've laid out some hard truths.
We have.
About the financial realities of special education. What can our listeners take away from this conversation?
Well, I think the key takeaway is understanding that this isn't just about individual teacher struggles.
Okay.
It's a system in need of a fundamental shift.
Yeah.
The solutions lie in advocating for fair compensation.
Right.
Adequate funding, and policies that prioritize public education and ensure equitable access to quality special ed services for all students. It's been an eye-opening deep dive, to say the least.
Yeah.
But as we move forward, it's crucial to remember that recognizing the problem is the first step towards enacting real change.
Absolutely.
We've explored the challenges, but now let's delve into potential solutions and what those might look like in practice.
Sounds good. And when we talk about change, it's important to acknowledge that the way we talk about the special education teacher shortage often misses the mark. There's a tendency to oversimplify the issue.
Right.
And that can actually hinder progress.
So we've talked about how focusing solely on teacher burnout can be a distraction.
Right.
Are there other narratives that we need to be wary of?
Absolutely. For example, the narrative that frames school choice as this universally beneficial solution for education. While choice can be empowering for some families, it often comes at the expense of public schools, especially when it comes to special ed funding.
We touched on this a bit earlier, but can you elaborate on why that is?
So public schools have a legal mandate to serve all students, regardless of their needs.
Right.
This inclusivity requires a robust and well-funded system of special education services. When resources are diverted away from public schools through voucher programs or the expansion of charter schools that aren't held to the same standards of inclusion, it creates an imbalance.
So it's like taking water from a well that everyone relies on to fill a smaller private pool.
That's a great analogy.
The well might run dry, leaving those who depend on it most vulnerable.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of really examining the full impact of policies before we embrace them as solutions. School choice can be a powerful tool, but it needs to be implemented thoughtfully and with a focus on equity for all students.
Are we saying that school choice is inherently bad?
Not necessarily. It's about understanding the nuances and potential consequences. Unfettered school choice without proper funding mechanisms and accountability for all institutions can actually exacerbate existing inequalities. It's crucial to have a system that ensures adequate and equitable resources for public schools, which remain the cornerstone of education for the vast majority of students, including those with special needs.
So this brings us to the question of solutions.
Yes.
We've identified some fundamental issues. But what are some tangible steps we can take to address this?
Well, we need to move beyond Band-Aid solutions and embrace systemic change. And that starts with recognizing the value of special ed teachers and compensating them accordingly. Salaries need to be competitive with other professions that require similar levels of education and expertise.
So you're talking about a major shift.
I am.
In how we view and prioritize this profession.
Absolutely. It's about investing in our educators. Both financially and professionally. And this investment extends beyond individual teachers to encompass the entire system.
Got it.
We need to make sure that schools have adequate funding to provide the resources and support that special ed teachers need to thrive.
So it's not just about higher salaries.
No.
It's about creating a supportive environment where teachers have the resources, the tools, smaller class sizes that allow them to truly focus on student needs.
Precisely. Think about what that might look like. Imagine classrooms equipped with the latest assistive technology.
Wow. Yeah.
Staffed with enough aides and paraprofessionals.
Right.
And organized to allow for that individualized attention.
Yeah.
This requires adequate funding and a commitment to prioritizing special education.
Absolutely.
Within the broader education landscape.
It sounds like a significant investment.
It is.
But isn't that ultimately an investment in our collective future?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When we support special education, we're supporting the full potential of every student.
Right.
We're creating a more inclusive and just society.
Yeah.
Where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
It has.
And honestly, a little disheartening. Yeah. We've uncovered some difficult realities about the state of special education.
We have.
But within these challenges, there's also a glimmer of hope, right?
I think so. I think the very fact that we're having this conversation,
right,
that people are starting to pay attention to these issues, is a sign of progress. Awareness is the first step towards change.
And while the challenges are significant,
yes,
they're not insurmountable.
No, they're not.
We have the knowledge, the resources, and the collective will to create a better system for our students and our educators.
One of the promising developments we're seeing is the emergence of these innovative programs aimed at supporting aspiring special ed teachers.
Okay. Tell me more about this.
So, for instance, some states are piloting residency programs.
Oh, interesting.
Similar to what medical residents go through.
So it's more than just traditional student teaching?
Much more.
Okay.
These programs provide intensive training and mentoring, while the aspiring teacher is still working towards certification.
Okay.
And crucially, these residencies are paid.
Okay, so that helps alleviate that financial barrier that we talked about?
Exactly.
That's a significant step in the right direction.
It is.
Are there other initiatives that you find encouraging?
Yes, there's a growing movement towards targeted loan forgiveness programs.
Oh, wow.
Specifically for special education teachers.
Okay.
And this helps address the burden of student debt,
right,
which we know is a major deterrent for many who might otherwise consider this career path.
These are fantastic developments.
They are.
But realistically, how widespread are these programs?
That's a good question.
Are they accessible to everyone who needs them?
Unfortunately, not yet. They're still relatively limited in scope and availability.
Right.
And it's important to remember that while these programs address some of the symptoms, they don't necessarily solve the underlying systemic issues.
So while we celebrate these positive steps,
yes,
we can't lose sight of the bigger picture.
We can't. We need to continue pushing for comprehensive policy changes.
Right.
That prioritize funding for public education.
Okay.
Ensure equitable resource allocation, and create a truly supportive environment for special education teachers.
It's about changing the system itself.
It is.
Not just putting bandages on its shortcomings.
And that change begins with shifting the narrative.
Okay.
We need to move away from these simplistic explanations and delve into the complex realities of special ed.
Okay.
We need to challenge assumptions.
Yeah.
And advocate for policies that prioritize the needs of all students.
We've talked a lot about the policy side of things.
Yeah.
But what about the individual level?
Yeah.
What can our listeners do?
Oh, there are so many ways to get involved.
Yeah.
You can start by contacting your elected officials, urging them to prioritize special education funding. You can support organizations that are working to improve the lives of special ed teachers and students.
Okay.
You can even volunteer your time at a local school.
Wow.
Or become a mentor for an aspiring teacher.
So many different options.
There are.
It's about finding what resonates with you and taking action.
It is.
Even small steps can contribute to a larger movement.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't just about fixing the teacher shortage.
Right.
It's about creating a more equitable and just education system for all students.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that every child deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential. And that requires investing in the people who are dedicated to making that happen.
This conversation has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
But I can't help but feel a sense of urgency. We've identified these critical issues. We've explored potential solutions. But what happens if we don't act?
Right.
What's at stake here?
Well, the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay.
If we fail to address this, we risk failing an entire generation of students.
Wow.
We risk creating a system where only those with access to resources and privilege can thrive.
Right.
while those who need the most support are left behind.
It's a stark reminder of the responsibility we all share to advocate for a better future for our children and our society.
And it's a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent.
Right.
This is a fight worth fighting, and it's a fight we can win if we work together.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But we know this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore, so much more to understand about the complexities of special ed.
Absolutely.
And we encourage our listeners to continue this journey of discovery.
Please do.
Read the research, engage in conversations, and most importantly, take action.
Take action.
We've laid the groundwork.
We have.
But the real work happens when we all step up and demand better.
Yes.
For our students, our educators, and our communities.
Absolutely.
It feels like we're at a crossroads.
Yeah, I think so.
We've seen how certain policies, while maybe well-intentioned, can unintentionally create these ripple effects that ultimately harm the very students they aim to help.
It's a reminder that policy decisions aren't made in a vacuum.
Right.
They have real-world consequences.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to scrutinize those consequences, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as education.
Absolutely. We've talked about the need for increased funding for special ed.
Right.
But it's not just about the amount of money. It's also about how that money is allocated.
Yeah. Exactly. We need to make sure that the funding is directed towards the institutions that are obligated to serve all students, including those with special needs.
Right.
Public schools are the cornerstone of our education system, and they need to be adequately resourced to fulfill their mission.
So when funding is diverted away from public schools, it's not just a budgetary matter.
Right.
It's an issue of equity and access.
Precisely. It creates a system where some students are afforded more choices and opportunities, while others are left in these under-resourced environments, struggling to meet their basic needs.
Right. And that's not just unfair. It's detrimental to our society.
Absolutely.
It's a stark reminder that the choices we make, the policies we support, have a direct impact on the lives of real people.
Real people.
Especially those who are most vulnerable.
And that's why it's so crucial that we engage in these conversations. Be informed citizens. Understand the complexities of these issues. And advocate for solutions that benefit everyone.
It's interesting to think about how the narrative around teacher shortages often focuses on individual teachers.
Right.
Their struggles, their burnout, without really acknowledging the systemic forces at play.
Yeah, it's like blaming a plant for wilting.
Right.
Without recognizing that it's been planted in poor soil. And hasn't received enough sunlight.
Yeah.
We can't expect teachers to thrive. In an environment that doesn't support them. That doesn't provide them with the resources that they need to be successful.
So we're circling back to that core idea of shifting the narrative.
Absolutely.
Looking beyond the symptoms and addressing the root causes.
It's about moving beyond simplistic explanations. And embracing the complexity of this issue. It's about recognizing that the special education teacher shortage is a reflection of a system that undervalues and underfunds this vital profession.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway?
Oh, that's a great question.
You want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that every child deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their background or their learning needs.
Absolutely.
And that requires a system that invests in special education. That supports our teachers. And that ensures equitable access to quality education for all students.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has been.
And I'm sure our listeners have gleaned a lot of valuable insights
I hope so.
from your expertise. As we conclude, what final thought would you leave our listeners with?
Stay engaged. This isn't a problem that will solve itself. Stay informed about the issues. Ask questions. And advocate for change. The future of special education, and indeed the future of our society, depends on it.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But we know this is just the beginning of the conversation.
It is.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the special education teacher shortage.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you found it informative and empowering.
Yes.
And we encourage you to continue exploring this really important topic.
Please do.
We'll catch you on our next deep dive.